Hello all, welcome back. You've probably seen the trend going around where people put their pictures of their lore up on Instagram. Like the TV shows, movies that shaped them growing up. So today I want to take you on a little journey through my magical, chaotic, and slightly unhinged author lore. This is the story of how Pokemon, Buffy, angsty vampires, chosen one stories, and a rocking horse that broke my heart turned me into the writer that I am today. I was definitely that weird kid, the one pretending to be a lion on the playground, pretending you're in the Lion King films, daydreaming entire stories during class when you should be concentrating on your work, and rewatching Labyrinth and Kindergarten Cop until the VHS wore out. And it did. My mother will tell you. My favourite shows were shows like Powerpuff Girls, Scooby Doo, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, basically pure, beautifully chaotic energy. And they all scratched different itches for me. Powerpuff Girls was my early taste of girl power, tiny girls taking on villains and monsters, and unapologetically strong. I didn't realise it at the time, but it made something click that you could be fierce, you could fight back, even when the world was much, much bigger than you. Scooby Doo, who of us did not love Scooby Doo? It fed the little detective in me, the curiosity, the mystery, the way they faced the creepy unknown with humour and friendship. Maybe that was comforting too, like a little reminder that no matter how scary something looks, it's often not as monstrous as it seems, especially if you've got a team of friends with you. Then there's Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon, which I still love to this day, but like power surges, transformations, loyalty, chosen ones, bonds deeper than blood, Goku and Vegeta. Honestly, they were probably my first taste of morally grey versus Golden Boy, and I lived for their dynamic. That intensity, the rivalry. If you're a DBZ fan, you know. You know. The almost emotional repression energy that I now write into all of my main male characters. Um, but it was the movies that really stuck with me for all these decades, the ones I watched over and over and over again. Um, the main one I can remember is Land Before Time. Absolutely broke me. Taught me about loss, taught me about grief, about survival. Littlefoot losing his mum wasn't just sad, it was real. And it made me feel less alone, like maybe I wasn't the only kid carrying too much too young. FernGully, if you like fairy and fae books now, you definitely loved FernGully. That was my first eco fantasy awakening. The visuals, the glow in nature, the danger of humans destroying magic and forests. It sparked something in me like wonder, that awe. It was beautiful and tragic and hopeful. And I think a lot of my world building now still echoes that like brilliant balance between magic and destruction. Now, I'm a massive Star Wars fan. Everyone who knows me knows I've got a Leia tattoo because Leia in the films, was absolutely everything. She was commanding, brave, compassionate. She wasn't just a love interest. She led. She was badass. And I just remember thinking, I want to write women like her, women who save themselves, girls that lead armies. Whenever I stayed at my nan and granddad's house, we always used to go to Blockbuster and I would rent the same film every single time. And that was The Last Unicorn. It was pure dreamscape. Sad, soft, surreal, a fairy tale that didn't shy away from darkness. I adore it to this day. It taught me that fantasy could be poetic and melancholy, that magic and sorrow can live side by side. And I still chase that tone a bit in my writing. And if you're wondering about my first crushes, definitely Vegeta and Goku. And Disney's Robin Hood. Yes, the fox. No, I will not be taking questions. These are the big ones, the game changers, the soul shapers. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, of course. Charmed, Supernatural. There's a running theme here, if you can see. Twilight, Lord of the Rings. These weren't all just shows and movies, they were home. My room? wall-to-wall posters, my notebooks, stuff with fan fiction, some angsty, some spicy, some dramatic, and my heart, honestly, still not over Aragorn. He will always be the fantasy main male character for me. He was the blueprint, the quiet strength, the loyalty, the kind of man who could wield a sword and yet grieve beautifully. Devastating. Buffy, that was the first time I saw a woman, a young girl, be allowed to be strong and vulnerable. She could slay vampires, still fall apart over love. She could be the hero and still crave softness. And that meant a lot to me growing up because I grew up thinking strong meant silent or stoic, but she cried. She got angry, she made mistakes, and she came back from them. She was powerful because she felt deeply, and now as an adult, I can see that clearly. Also, Spike and Buffy were my first ship. Messy, passionate, borderline toxic, but so magnetic. They were in pain and chaos, but how much chemistry did they have? I didn't have the words for it then, but I was drawn to relationships with tension, obviously, with push and pull, with trauma and healing tangled together. Let's be real. Look at my books now. The influence is very clear. Charmed. Who was a charmed sister? Because it just gave you that sisterhood vibe, element of magic and aesthetic. But my heart will always be with Supernatural, with Sam and Dean. Emotional repression, deeply codependent men with floppy hair. There's a very clear through line in my writing. And then Twilight hit and something cracked open. I was full on obsessed. Edward poster on my wall, reading fanfiction until 2 a.m. Obsessed. That was when I actually started writing fanfiction, not just for school, not for anyone else, but because I had feelings I could not contain. These characters lived in my head rent free, and I needed to give them more time. And I think that's when I knew writing wasn't just a hobby, it was survival. It was expression, it was the only way I could make sense of everything I was feeling. The first book that I can remember absolutely wrecking me is The Enchanted Horse by Magdalena Nab. I spoke about it in my last video, but it's this quiet little story about a wooden rocking horse that comes to life and then has to leave. That's it. That's the plot. But it broke me. I was a kid, and something about the sadness of loving something magical only to lose it really stuck with me. I cried, and I didn't understand why it hurt so much, but it did. And honestly, that kind of melancholy wonder still runs through everything I write. I love fantasy with heartache, magic, and consequences. Just beauty that aches. I love a bittersweet book. And that was what The Enchanted Horse taught me, that even the softest stories can cut really deep. Of course, Harry Potter. I was bought the first Harry Potter book when I was 7, when it came out. And for me, it wasn't just about the magic or the cool spells or the talking photos. It was about the chosen one narrative. I was a child growing up in a dysfunctional, sometimes violent home, and I felt out of place a lot, small, powerless, as you can imagine. But then there was this story about this little boy living in a cupboard, overlooked and unwanted, who turned out to be magical, important, chosen. You can see why I was drawn in. I didn't know I was clinging to that narrative as tightly as I was, but I can obviously see it now. I didn't want to be rescued. I wanted to discover I was meant for something more, that all the hurt had a purpose, that maybe if I just held on long enough, I'd find my way to something bigger, brighter, something that was just mine. And that's why Chosen One stories still mean so much to me, why I write characters who discover inner strength in the face of fear. It's why one of the main quotes in my very first book is, "If there is no fear, there is no being brave." Just characters who carve their place out in the world, even when they've been told that they don't belong. I started writing fan fiction around the time Twilight exploded. Like many of us, I got completely swept up in the sparkly vampire romance and had to explore more. More angst, more scenes, more what ifs. That was my gateway drug into writing, besides the typical journal writing and in school writing. And then when I turned 18, I dipped my toe into spicy fan fiction. Actually, no, I cannonballed into it. No regrets, zero shame. That was where I learned to really write tension and build emotional payoff, let characters be messy and raw. And honestly, fanfic taught me more about romance writing than anything else. It was a sandbox to experiment and a place to be bold and make mistakes. But my first ever original story, that was where it all started to feel personal. I started writing it when I was about 19. It was this dark dystopian world where a girl is protecting her younger brother from genetically engineered children, kids with feathered wings, which were created by her father, who was a rogue scientist. Um, these winged children are preternaturally strong, emotionally fractured, and basically triggered the apocalypse. I might still write it because it sounds good when I say it like that. So, but it was weird, it was intense, it was about survival, family, guilt, and it was so me. Even now, I can see the roots of my current books in that story with the found family, morally grey science, girls with grit, and creatures that straddle the line between monstrous and beautiful. And then I'll always remember my GCSE English exam. We were asked to write a short creative story. It was just this big space. So naturally, I rewrote the entire plot to Final Fantasy X. If you know me, you know I'm a big gaming nerd. I'm a big lover of Final Fantasy. So I didn't just write a summary, I fully novelized it, scene by scene, emotional beats, character development, and in a monologue. I had to ask for extra paper, and the invigilator looked at me like, are you okay? But in my head, I was thriving. I was telling a story that meant something to me, and I wasn't going to cut corners for the sake of a word count. Looking back, I think that's when I knew storytelling wasn't just a hobby. It was how I process, how I connect, how I found meaning. Today, I'm still that same kid, the one who daydreamed during car journeys, who stared out the window imagining wings unfolding from a dragon as they flew through the sky, or a sword suddenly appearing in my hand. The one who needed stories not just for fun, but for safety, for survival, for hope. And this is why I always say books saved my life. That part of me never left. I just got better at turning those daydreams into full-blown worlds. But my creativity now is fueled by the things that still make my heart ache. Things like Final Fantasy for its epic scope and emotional devastation, Skyrim for the sense of immersion and ancient magic, Monster Hunter for the thrill of surviving in a wild, dangerous world, Star Wars, Marvel, Vampire Diaries, all full of legacy, all full of love, power, pain, and also Pinterest boards. So many Pinterest boards with glowing eyes, shadowy forests, and beautiful landscapes. All of those vibes, all of those visuals, the feelings, they shape the atmosphere of all of my books, and especially my first book series. If you've read it, you can probably feel the Final Fantasy DNA and the emotional weight of the world. There's Skyrim in the bones of the mountains, the ruins, the magical relics. I never stopped chasing stories that made me feel powerful or seen or even emotional. I just started building my own. And if I could say one thing to the little girl, to me, sitting on a floor with battered VHS copies of her favourite movies, watching them for the 20th time, and dreaming about being someone or something more, I would say stay strong, keep dreaming. You're going to build worlds someday. So, yeah, thank you for joining me on this nostalgic spiral. If you related to any of this, or if you also had a confusing crush on animated foxes, hit that like button or spirit the horse. Subscribe and tell me your origin story in the comments. More books, more chaos, more romantasy to come. See you next time.